Hello and a very warm welcome to this edition of Talking Europe. Well, in his last supper with EU leaders, David Cameron pushed for close ties to remain between the UK and the bloc, saying that while the UK was leaving the Union, it was not turning its back on its neighbours. So how are the rest of the EU leaders digesting the UK's vote? Well, as they met for the first time as 27. And now, while we don't have a crystal ball exactly, I do have some guests to try and let us look into what the future may hold. With me in studio, I have from the Scottish National Party, Mr. Alan Smith. Welcome to you. Across at the other side, I have Jude Curtin-Darling. You're with Labour, one of the Labours that was pushing for that in vote, actually, both of you looking for the in. From Poland, I have Mr. Jacek Zariusz-Wolski. Thanks for being with us. And to give us the Dutch perspective, I have Bas Eickhout. Thank you all for being with us. Let's look first at this idea. The UK voted leave, but it hasn't yet left. Is it fair to delay on that, Ms. Curtin-Darling?
I think it's the only thing that we can do at the moment. We have an enormous crisis in the UK in Westminster parties. We have also a crisis stemming from the Leave campaign, really, that they campaigned, many of them, for years and years to leave the EU. And it was only when the vote was taken that it became clear that they have absolutely no plan about what leaving actually means or about what they want in a negotiation.
How does the rest of the EU feel that? Is that not frustrating to have a member that has voted to leave and is still clinging on?
Well, we regret. But we have to respect. In the meantime, we need calm and reflection, but we cannot wait very long. So we're not pressing for tomorrow's Article 50. They have to put their house in order, but not too long. We need to answer yes or no, Article 50, and if so, swift negotiations and divorce. It is destabilizing economically and politically, and we have to continue as 27.
Now, the leader of the Law and Justice Party in Poland, Jarosław Kaczynski, he actually is hitting perhaps for this idea of a second referendum. And the more we delay on putting in place Article 50, the more people are looking at that option. And Mr. Alan Smith, we'll get into the Scottish part of it in just a few minutes. But do you think that it would be fair to put this to a second referendum in the UK? Is it even possible?
I think it's early for any predictions of that sort. It's obvious that the people who led the Leave campaign were going to fight the good fight and then lose and then promote themselves as, well, I have my principles. I think it was a cynical, dirty game. So in terms of another referendum, when we trigger Article 50, I think Westminster has descended into a nihilistic chaos, that if Article 50 was triggered, there's nobody on the end of the phone who is serious. And
but
I don't think now's the time.
OK, now's not the time. Well, let's look then at what, let's listen to David Cameron's idea that the UK will leave, and now it's a question of how it leaves and what kind of relations it will have. Mr. Bas Eickhout, Netherlands, one of the biggest trading partners, really, with the UK. How close do you think the UK is going to be able to stay with the EU? There is a lot of needs that go both ways. Surely they'll get a good deal.
Well, that remains to be seen as well, because first of all, we need to trigger this Article 50, because only then we can start the negotiations. And I think we all have to be very clear. We only start these negotiations from the moment the UK has officially invoked Article 50. We can't wait until the Tories have sorted their house, that a political party is deciding on who is going to be their leader. Yes. And we all Europeans have to wait for that. Well, that's the most stupid thing to have. And once we have that Article 50, then we will have these discussions. Well, and for me, that is important, is that it's going to be a fair deal for all of us, for the EU and the UK. I
want to get into what that fair deal possibly could be in just a few minutes. But first, also this week, we saw the First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, coming to Brussels and meeting with EU leaders here. Let's take a quick look at how that went.
It's the emergency meeting Nicola Sturgeon hopes will secure Scotland's place in the European Union.
I've set out very clearly Scotland's desire to protect our relationship with the European Union. I don't underestimate the challenges that lie ahead for us in seeking to find a path.
Unlike England and Wales, where most people voted to leave the European Union last Thursday, 62% of Scots voted to stay. The Scottish National Party believes they're now entitled to another referendum on Scottish independence, the goal being to establish an independent nation-state with EU membership. Sturgeon's meeting follows a Scottish MEP's impassioned plea to the European Parliament on Tuesday.
Please remember this. Scotland did not let you down. Please, I beg you, chers collègues, do not let Scotland down now.
The Brexit vote has hurled the UK and its constituent nations into uncharted territory, but the majority of Scots will take solace in the fact that both the President of the European Union and the President of the European Commission are making time to discuss Scotland's place in a post-Brexit world.
Well, we saw there Nicola Sturgeon making her case to EU leaders. Alan Smith, you're of the Scottish National Party. You made a very passionate plea in the European Parliament this week, calling on the EU not to let Scotland down. Scotland really trying to stay part of the Union. But how possible is that really?
I think so many things are in flux at the moment. All things are possible. I talk about European status, because there are already variable geometries within different states. There's the Jersey, Guernsey within the UK, there's the Faroe Islands, Åland Islands. There are other ways of doing things. But what we have in Scotland is a strong, competent, credible, pro-European government that is not going to be a silent bystander in this. We are not going to allow Westminster's chaos to do Scotland's interests any damage.
Well, let me just bring in our guests. Our viewers may have noticed we have another guest at the table, Mr. David Coburn. You're also Scottish. You're with the UKIP party, so we're clearly voting to leave that EU bloc. How do you feel it might work in Scotland? Your region really wanting to stay in, not very happy with the result.
We're not a region, we're a kingdom. And to be honest with you, 40% of that kingdom, 40% of the Scots voted to leave, to leave the European Union. So it's not the majority of, everybody wants to be part of this. 60% do, yes. But then we had a referendum before that to decide whether we're part of the UK or not. And we decided overwhelmingly to remain part of it. And you can't change the rules.
Second referendum on independence?
Well, they'll lose. But I don't think that's going to happen because Nicola Sturgeon wouldn't dare, because she knows she'd lose. Because most people voted 2 million people voted to remain in the United Kingdom, and I think it was 1.6 million decided to remain in Europe. Well, I'm sorry, when it comes to that, whether we stay in the UK or we go into Europe, without the rest of the UK, I can tell you the Scots will plump to remain in the UK. So it's all nonsense. And the European Union are not going to wear it anyway because they don't want balkanisation. They don't want trouble in places like in Spain, where you've got the Catalonians and all the rest.
Well, that is a question, Mr. Smithee. How open do you think, because even if Scotland doesn't hold its independence referendum and even if it stays part of the UK, you're still trying to keep ties with the EU, are you not? And how might that work? How open will the EU be to having a separate deal for Scotland, given the fears perhaps of other setting a precedent?
It's other people who are talking about independence. We reserve our right to do whatever we need to do to safeguard Scotland's best interests. But what we have seen this week was a very warm regard within the European Parliament, and I've had many texts and emails from many people within Brussels and member state capitals that recognises that Scotland wants something different out of this, and we are not happy to allow a dysfunctional Westminster which is collapsing into chaos to represent us in the wider world. And I spoke in the debate this week because I didn't want Nigel Farage to speak for my country. However we define my country, I don't want him speaking for me.
Can I just say that Alan's speech was nonsense. The only people clapping were all the lefties on his side. And if you'd seen, the European Union always manage the cameras in the Parliament, and it was only the lefties clapping him. The rest of the people were not clapping,
Mr.
I can assure
Coburn,
you.
one thing that has come out
EPP was clapping.
Yes, I was about to say.
EPP was clapping.
The biggest
lefties.
We are left.
So,
No, but
okay,
the
so in the
majority-
Parliament, 80% is left.
Well, they
to
are.
UKIP.
That's half the problem. That's why it doesn't represent what Britain thinks. So that's why we want out.
But Mr. Coburn, a lot of people that voted leave seem to be voting on this emotional idea and on the idea of migration, wanting to keep not even European citizens out, but non-European citizens out of the UK. At the same time, the UK isn't part of Schengen. So there seems to be a lot of confusion, a lot of voting that people didn't understand.
We just want a points-based system. We want to be able to control our borders. Now, if Scotland
do you
wasn't
think
part
that people were informed enough when they made their vote?
Of course they were. Everybody knew fine well. We were bored to death. People were so bored by the end of it, they didn't want to hear another thing about it. And all we want is control of our own country and our own border. We want democracy. democracy is not the European Union. Here, it's run by the Commission, which is not elected,
look,
it's
let's
appointed,
look at
and the Parliament is a fig
The
leaf.
campaign
There's no power at all.
is
Nonsense.
over.
Yes, let's look at
I
the
want to
future
remind,
of the
no
EU.
need to lie again. You control your borders. You are not in the Schengen.
No,
You are responsible for your borders.
As long as the European Union,
Let's-
we cannot
let's
stop
move,
people
though, to
just
the
flooding
future-
in.
the
And we
future
need
of
to
the
control
EU.
our own borders to
Mr.
save
Coburn.
our health service and to make sure
Mr.
people
Coburn,
have housing.
let's move to the future
The
of the
social
EU,
issues,
and that already seems very divided between the Leave voters. I mean, UKIP seem to not want anything, not want to be part of this single market at all, because being part of the single market would generally mean allowing this free movement of
We
people.
don't need to be. All this is 1950s nonsense. We've got the World Trade Organization. We don't need it anymore, and it's all in the past. And we should have a free trade agreement. It's not in anyone's interest. Already, the German head of the CBI in Germany, or whatever you call it, he said that they want an immediate treaty with Britain, and so does New Zealand and Canada, New Zealand and Australia.
Mr.
It's all
Eickhout,
nonsense.
a big trading company in the Netherlands, how do you see it?
Let's go back to the democratic debate. What some person in Germany is saying, unelected, I think you should not
he's
really
head of the
quote
CBI,
because
he's
you
head of
don't
the
find...
He's head of the business people. We will actually create jobs.
Yes, I know,
We
but
give jobs to
you
your
are
people, not
always
family
blaming
politicians.
non-elected people, so you should not then
But the question of
rely on
All those
non-elected.
who
do
believe
you
it, so I
see
wouldn't worry
the
about
UK needing to stay part of this single market, or will they do a Canada on it and
I
have
think
a
in the
trade
end,
deal?
if you now look at the people that will do that will probably do the negotiations, they want to remain part of the internal market because that is for the UK of crucial importance. Once they do that, some things, of course, will come in return. And the freedom of labour will be part of that discussion.
An
We
essential
don't even
part.
know who's going to be negotiating it yet. We haven't even decided on Prime
We
Minister.
discussed that already.
And,
So
well,
in that
yes, but
sense-
they haven't decided
so-
on Prime Minister yet. And Mr. Heseltine,
Mr.
who I
Coburn,
don't
it's-
like very much, has said that Nigel Farage
It
is
does
Some
seem the
people would
majority
like to
of-
see
of
that
Leave-
others also can talk at this table.
sorry, of course you can.
That might be nice. And I think it's important to realize that you can't pretend that in negotiations you can only get what you want. Negotiations with another party means it's giving and taking, and that will happen.
Mr.
And a lot of the things that the Brits who are voting Leave thought to get rid of, they will be disappointed. They will
Mr.
be
Jaroszewski,
disappointed.
for example, to keep trading with the UK, Poland, for example, something like 800,000 Polish people have moved to the UK since 2004. Would that be something that you would have to stay on the table, the free movement of labour, free movement of people, in order to keep trade deals going?
Single market is four freedoms: goods, services, labour and capital. All of it or nothing. Britain cannot, or the Brexiters cannot, eat the cake and keep it.
Yes, we can.
Mr. Smith,
No, you
the
can't.
future of the
90%
UK,
fish
for you,
in
it's
Europe
going
are
to be...
controlled by us.
It's a really important point that one of the things that has been most disingenuous, and we've heard plenty of it here today, that immigration has been presented as some sort of problem. It is not. Immigration has been great for Scotland. Freedom of movement has been great for Scots to go elsewhere. It's been great for new Scots to come to Scotland for as long as they want to be here. They're welcome, they're celebrated, they're enriching our community in every possible way.
When you
thing we
take
want.
distance from this and you see the EU now without the UK, and the UK not looking great in the days after that referendum result, it looks quite lost. Do you think perhaps the EU might be better off? I mean, the other populist nationalist parties will see the UK where it's gone now and not want
I
the
think
same?
now's the time for cool heads and warm hearts. There's a lot of people feeling very nervous about their personal situation, their own jobs. The Westminster chaos is
How will they
deeply,
be
deeply
protected?
depressing
Yeah.
to watch. And Scotland, thank goodness, has a strong and competent pro-European government. We will not be silent within this process.
One last question I want to bring up, because we have been looking at other EU countries almost clamouring for another referendum. I can see you, Mr. Eickhout, nodding your head. In your home country, the Netherlands, we have Geert Wilders. If I understand correctly, he's the Nationalist Party. He's topping the polls in surveys. He has said that if he gets elected Prime Minister, he will hold the same referendum on EU membership.
Yes, well, first of all, he needs to change the law then, because we don't have a law yet that can just have a referendum on this issue. I mean, we do have a referendum, but that's for lawmaking. So after law, it's a corrective referendum. There is no law at this moment, a new one, which a referendum can be evoked upon. So it's a lot of rhetorics also. We've seen that in many countries. Whether there will be a referendum or not, I think it will be part of the elections. We will have elections in March, and clearly Europe is going to be an item. But to be honest, okay, we can focus on Geert Wilders, but there's one thing. In the Netherlands, every vote counts already. We don't have this rather peculiar system as the UK has. at the first past the post system. Here in the Netherlands, every vote counts.
so
And
it
Mr.
would have
Geert
a different
Wilders
outcome
will
even
never
if-
get a majority.
We'll have
He
to
won't.
wait till March to see that. But finally, Mr. Jaruzelski, how do you feel about the future of the EU without the UK? Do you think perhaps we could see, I saw the Visegard group coming and saying we wanted to increase unity now within the EU, that is what the EU needs to focus on?
Will be less secure and less prosperous and weaker vis-à-vis external challenges like Russia, for example, and will be less transatlantic. So I regret. But exactly for that reason, we have to consolidate the remaining 27, all of us, and continue our journey towards united Europe.
And see what relations. Well, I'm not sure we've answered many of the questions currently on the table here in Brussels and indeed in the United Kingdom, but we have come to the end of this part of the show.
Say one thing,
Mr. Coburn.
That the troubles you're seeing in the markets in England and the government confusion, Alan's saying it's all mad and confused. It's not. It's basically the markets got it wrong. The bankers got it wrong.
Well, I don't think the markets
everyone
like
got it wrong.
certainty.
The peasants
We could start. We could start the
Everyone is
debate
wrong apart.
again.
Nigel
UKIP.
Farage
We
is
could start
more
the
for
debate
world
again, Mr.
revolution
Coburn, but we're out of time. We're going to have to leave it there.
Comrade
Thanks indeed for watching this part of Talking Europe. Join us again after the break when we'll be joined by the President of Bulgaria to give us his view on this result.